Phil Reese is the global head of talent acquisition at Klaivyo and was just named to both the Talent 100 Global Power List. Before Klaivyo, he was at Meta, built Chewy's tech employer brand from scratch, and started his career at Tech Systems.
When I was solicited for Chewy, I was like, never heard of them. 2 weeks later, I'm selling them like I founded the company. That was always my selling point at Chewy. Don't go to Meta, you can't make a difference. I learned how wrong I was. I think as I started getting leadership roles, I would get pissed that my team didn't want it as much as I did when I was in their seat. And my boss at the time set me down because he's like, look, your drive is what's gonna kill you in this job, or you're never gonna be a good leader. To me, I just want to be the most successful and make the most money. And I did. The problem was, it was pretty damn lonely.
I think that's such great advice to invest more time in top performers, but also to learn what motivates employees and use that to drive whatever you need to drive within the company.
I think a listening culture is part of understanding where to make changes and where not to make changes. I don't always find the best team member to be the most successful when it comes to number of hires. There's a lot of things that go into that, but it's how are we lifting up the team, making the team better. Good talent follows good leadership, right? So I think the best way to be known is hire great, inspiring leaders. People want to join that and then become a part of that.
What's a green flag that most people overlook?
Yeah, this one's tough. I would say,
welcome to Call HR Podcast with the host, Michelle Volberg.
Okay, so Phil Reese is the global head of talent acquisition at Klaviyo and was just named to both the Talent 100 Global Power List. Before Klaviyo, he was at Meta, built Chewy's tech employer brand from scratch, and started his career at Tech Systems. Welcome, Phil, to Call HR.
awesome, happy to be here.
So at Chewy, you had to convince engineers to join a company famous for selling dog food. How do you even start that conversation?
It's a great question. And it was intimidating at first, I won't lie. And one of the reasons I debated joining Chewy in the first place is I'd come from tech in the past. But it started more simple than you'd think. We actually asked everyone if they were pet parents and pet owners. At the time, Chewy wasn't as well known, but your PetSmarts, your Petco is very well known. So starting with that connection point gave a different way of entry. And we used to joke, we made t-shirts for Java pet parents because we coded in Java. We would do LinkedIn projects for pet owners. So it resonated with that cohort and people love their pets. So despite that being what our brand was known for, people resonated to that. The challenge was not everyone did. So part of it was already pet owners. Some of it became an acquisition play because people had shopped brick and mortar and then wanted to explore our experience via e-commerce. So it actually turned into an acquisition play. But for folks that weren't pet owners, I think it was a chance to be visible and be real time of like their work is seen and consumed by customers, friends, family. So there was a connection point that the work is actually meaningful and what they create is actually visible. So when I started at the time, I think it was 3 million customers. I think now it's over 20 million.
Wow.
But we wanted to make sure we found a way that people understood there was a way that their work was seen and that it mattered. I think lastly, when you think about COVID too, how important that was during that time. We were in hyper growth at that time as a company. Then COVID put it into overdrive for people to help people get access to things like dog food and things of that nature during that time. It became a mission that people resonated with and got behind. So it had different stages and stories, but it wasn't as hard as I thought it was going to be. And people love their pets. So it turned out to be a really fun experience and something we thoroughly enjoyed.
I love that. I mean, it makes sense. I have a dog and a cat. And if I had to go work for another company, the way you would get me is probably through one of my pets.
Yeah.
It just pulls at the heartstrings. And another really interesting thing about your background is you actually came up through staffing agencies, not corporate recruiting. And there are so many differences in those two worlds and so many similarities. What do you think agency recruiters know that in-house corporate recruiters don't know?
I think there's a lot of ways to answer this question, but agency is chaotic, right? So it's how to deal with change frequently, how to deal with real-time insights that are different for companies, right? So Big difference is you're supporting a ton of companies at the same time versus one. So the one is evolving, but usually relatively static. The mini, where you're trying to piece all the things together, requires just a different way of operating, a different mindset. So you learn how to operate with less. Usually there's less access, less info as well in the agency side, because you're, as a recruiter, shielded between a account manager and the client versus an in-house recruiter who's probably direct to the hiring manager and the teams. So information's limited. You're not guessing, but you have to make more educated guesses, have less access, and you're competing against others to make it work, right? So there's a level of resilience there as well. So I think if I was to say one thing they know that in-house recruiters don't, I think it's just how to deal with being told no more frequently, as you lose more than you win. But there's more shots on goal. So usually that helps kind of balance those two things out.
Do you think starting in that environment actually made you more successful today?
Without a doubt. Yes. I think agency recruiting has a way of capturing folks who have no idea what they want to be when they grow up, and puts them in a lot of real challenging and complex situations when they're very young or very inexperienced in the workplace. Is usually it's a out of college type of gateway into the workplace. So I think it teaches you a lot of life lessons and a lot of difficult scenarios that accelerates your, I think, ability to just see it versus learn about it, hear about it over time. So I think the best people I know in the industry all started in that capacity.
Yeah. I would also say Teach for America has
Yeah.
like makes really strong recruiting leaders. Okay. So when you started at Tech Systems, it's one of the biggest IT staffing firms in the world. Tell folks a little bit like what that environment was like. There are some people that are considering staffing firms versus corporate recruiting. What is a typical day like? Like, what is the environment there?
Yeah, you're thrown into the fire. I think in the early days, not to date myself, but I believe it was more of a reality TV show. So you had just chaos, you had drama, you had just things going on at all times. It was chaotic and it was fast paced, but it was very social too, right? Like the DNA of an agency, particularly like Tech Systems, is relationship building both internally and externally, right? So you're working alongside these long days in this grind with your best friends and people that become like, I hate to cliche the family title, but it just felt like that was your circle, your people. And you wanted it to be, right? It created an environment where it wasn't like you couldn't wait to leave work. It was like you actually really truly enjoyed being a part of that. So I think if someone's considering an agency, it's an environment where you feel accepted, you feel invested in, you feel like the opportunity is there for kind of an untapped ceiling if you want to pursue it. So it kind of meets you at your place in terms of how hard you want to work, how much money you want to make, but it's not easy and it's chaotic. It teaches you a lot of life lessons early. So I think for people that are ready for that, I think that's an open-minded to that. I think a great place to start. I think people who don't really want to grind and don't want to put in that effort out front and want more of a like structured environment, I don't know that it'd be the right fit. So it just depends on your DNA, which is why a lot of these agencies hire former athletes or people who were heading up clubs or things at their universities. Like it just gets a certain type of person. But that entrepreneurial person is typically the one that really succeeds, and it gives you a ton of platforms to do that.
Yeah. I mean, if you can get through that, the resilience and the grit that just like go into your DNA moving forward is pretty unmatched. And I think this is true. You are also training new recruiters while doing the job yourself there. So, what makes a recruiter stand out, like a good recruiter stand out from one that is not going to cut it?
It's interesting because I mentioned the drive and there's a level of resilience. So you're looking at people who are owners who work really hard, who have that unwavering work ethic. But I think the ones that really make it have all those, but also have patience. It is a game that builds over time. So some people who are super ambitious, you're never going to see the peak of your success in year one. That's both financially as well as just the job itself. But those that have the patience to know and understand that by year two, by year three, you could meet someone at year 10, right? It's just, it takes that first year grind, which typically washes most folks out because they want it now and they're not willing to put in the work to build that foundation that then elevates them year 2+ to where it's just exponential, right? So the growth is incremental, but it gets higher and higher each year once you establish that foundation. Too many people wash out year 1 because they just don't either have what it takes, so they don't give it enough time, and decide that it's just not the right fit. So I think those that make it are a mix of being super driven, but also have patience to see the bigger picture and work towards how that fits their need internally. Is there's a lot of different avenues you can go within to grow.
Yeah, I'm curious, other than corporate recruiting, where did you see like other recruiters go professionally? Have you seen other paths?
It varies. I think people who really, really got out went to a like more corporate setting,
Mhm.
slower pace jobs. So a lot of variety there. Some went back to school. I would say if you looked at the biggest pathway, usually software sales or some kind of BDR type of job
Mhm.
was typically the or a CSM, like anything I think in the go-to-market function. So you'd have that customer management aspect, you'd have the recruiting. So you'd see people bounce around either into more formal HR recruiting or I would say more go-to-market sales support as traditionally the profiles that would fall out of that as well.
Today at Klaviyo, you lead talent acquisition. Are there traits or features that you train your current team that you have brought from staffing days?
Yeah, good question. Short answer is yes. I think it's that builder's mindset.
Mhm.
Uh, so someone who wants to promote change, someone who wants to drive change, and isn't afraid to do it, right? So building people up to understand that like you don't have to accept something the way it is. You can always work to make it better. So trying to upskill and provide people both empowerment around that, but also just skill building around that as well. I think one thing I took from agency, and I don't think it transcended across everyone, but it was that drive without that ego, right? I think the best people succeed if they're driven to do great things, but they're not doing it by themselves. They're not doing it for recognition. They're doing it for the greater purpose, the greater good. And I think those that are really successful in agency, but I don't think ever make it, lack that aspect of things. I think those that did make it have both the drive and the no ego. But I think the humility aspect, internally specifically, is so important because you rely on so many others to make things happen and grow at scale. And then I think the last thing is just an ownership mentality. I think there's always going to be things to do. I think it's a matter of identifying those things, going after those things versus, hiring people who wait to be told what to do, right? Like I think for me, it's always looking for someone who has a new idea, wants to explore that new idea. And I always say when I hire leaders, I want to hire leaders who are better than me at what I'm hiring them for, right? So they can always keep pushing the limit on those things and I can help provide support and elevate them in their platform. But you want people that are better than you at something. I think a lot of times people try to hire people that aren't as good because they're intimidated by that. And I think that's just sometimes a miss when looking to make the right hires.
Huge mistake. I mean, as a founder, I try to hire people that are smarter than me in whatever function that they are an expert in. Okay, so looking at your time at Chewy, obviously Chewy is a household name for pet owners, but engineers had no idea it was a tech company. How do you build a tech employer brand when the consumer brand pretty much overshadows everything?
Yeah, that was challenging. So I'll give you a story. So we founded in Dania Beach, so close to Fort Lauderdale, Miami, for anyone who doesn't know where that is. Dania Beach was where Chewy was founded. It is not known to be a tech community. South Florida is not known as a high tech, big tech environment. It's gotten better, but especially then, like there weren't a lot of companies that were known in that capacity. So that was also, I don't want to say working against us, but also limited in some ways what we could do. So one of the opportunities to build the brand was to diversify where we hired talent. So we went to Boston first, right? So Boston had good universities. Wayfair was really growing fast at that time, and obviously in the e-commerce space as well. So very different brand, but they saw a lot of success. We're like, okay, what are they doing? They were Boston rooted, we weren't. So there was a differentiation there, and that did matter going to Boston, which is a city with a ton of pride. So you also had the working against you as you're not from
Right.
here, right? So you had the engineers, the brands, and the fact that you're not local. So why are you here? It took a long time, honestly. It was just a grind. So I think for us, it was making sure we were very clear on why this is a good technology opportunity for candidates. So if I think about the tech stack, like we were early adopters of AWS. We went from the monolith to microservices. So we did things that were cool and seen as like tech forward. So that was important. We also hired great leaders. And I think good talent follows good leadership, right? So I think the best way to be known is hire great, inspiring leaders. People want to join that and then become a part of that. I think building that culture with the right people helped. And obviously Boston location, eventually Seattle, Minneapolis as well. So that all helped, I think, drive the brands. And then I think also like going public helped our visibility, right? So when I started, we were privately held, then we were acquired, then we went public. So there's different stages of, I think, visibility and being known. But it was just telling that story. And if I look back, we're ecom with many, like so much data, right? Ecom, millions of customers, but also it was like kind of the pre-AI. So discovery products, search, recommendation, personalization, all things that are super important now foundationally to driving AI and all the things related. I think we were ahead of the game there and spent a lot of time doing, I think, cool projects and work around those technologies that allowed people to understand like how it could fit despite not necessarily being on their radar. So what I always say is that we had to hook someone to take the call who was an engineer. That was the hard part. Once we got them on the call, I think we had a really good story to tell, both from a customer growth standpoint as well as a technology standpoint. But getting them on the call was the thing that took quite a bit of time. But we usually had a pretty good hit rate once we did, which was amazing.
And you also grew applicants from 165 to 1,500 in 3 years. Was there like a magic moment or was it gradual?
It's gradual. I wish. I've always searched for the silver bullet. I don't know that it exists, but the gradual, I think, iteration of this is time, right? So 3 million customers to 21 million customers, obviously, like that hits different.
Hmm.
Private to acquire to public, that hits different, right? So the just visibility around the brand and being known. Like when I was solicited for Chewy, I was like, never heard of them. 2 weeks later, I'm selling them like I founded the company, right? So like it changes quick, and now you go anywhere. I used to wear merch or swag at the airport. People would come up to me every time, undoubtedly, like no questions asked. But when I first started, I could have worn a costume for Chewy and no one would have known what the hell I was doing. So it's just a very different, I think, over time, gradual. I mentioned the Boston, the Minneapolis, the Seattle. I think getting out of just South Florida as a tech market allowed us to get more visibility and reach. We brought in more executives from Amazon and other well-known tech companies. So all those things, I think, led to a gradual buildup of the brands. And I think we became more known in places that had a reputation for being tech forward, which allowed us to attract, I think, a much higher volume of talent as well.
So when you guys went public and you IPO'd, did recruiting become harder or easier?
Loaded question. So the harder part is like you have the compliance, the structure, the planning,
Hmm.
forecasting. So it becomes more scrutinized, right? Instead of just saying like, I need this amount of hires, it's like, I made these commitments to Wall Street. We need to hit these forecasts. So like, I think folks were put into a lot of scenarios they had never had to deal with before. That's both hiring, that's both recruiting, that's the business. So I think you had to change your way of thinking and understand that there are consequences to being behind in hiring or being ahead of hiring, right? You had to be much more thoughtful. So I think from that standpoint, an adjustment for many. And that comes with challenges, could slow things down at first while you bring in the right structure. We made some mistakes, right? So it's how to fix those. I think on the other side of it, we exploded on our IPO day, like went up. We were very well like represented. We had a really good run out the gate, which helps. So that gives you visibility, but you now have tangible RSUs to sell, right? So instead of like selling an aspiration or a what if or funny money, as people call it, like you can now have a fully liquid comp strategy. And I think from that standpoint, once folks understood how to sell it and what it meant, and that was an education piece for many as well, I think it certainly helped make recruiting easier because you're now on the same playing field as a lot of our competitors at the time, especially in tech. Is we did hire from startups, but like your Wayfair is an example. A lot of these big tech companies,
Mhm.
HubSpot, CarGurus at the time, TripAdvisor, they're all public. So instead of selling a dream, we were able to actually like bring that together. And I think that certainly helped from for many feel like less of a risk.
Yeah, that's so fun to be able to actually sell something that people can touch and like
Yeah.
feel. Um, okay, so after Chewy, you went to Meta and you joined and led hiring for the privacy, security, and integrity team at Meta. What is it like recruiting for the most scrutinized part of a tech company?
Yeah, I'll double down on this. It's hard in general to be in the most scrutinized part. It's incredibly hard because I was more or less overseeing security. And I was brought in at the whistleblower time period. I was brought in during the Senate hearings post Cambridge Analytica. So it wasn't only the most scrutinized part, it was the most visible, the most publicized, the most talked about in the media, which is why I took the job. So, fun fact, I had been offered a job at Meta 2 years prior. I turned down, which was in the engineering organization, basically driving pipeline hiring, which is more or less like their repeatable profile and
Mhm.
driving that throughout various locations, including DC, Boston, New York. Awesome job. But to me, it sounded like come in and do what we want you to do because it's already built, right? So this, I actually voluntarily raised the hand and was like, I want to revisit on this. So I volunteered to tribute to join Meta and security.
I was like, you literally walked into fire.
I did, but I think that's just kind of who I am, and that was the appeal, right? My recruiter's like, she called me, and she who now works for me at Klaivyo, ironically enough, but she had called me and was like, "You said you wanted something crazy. I got something for you." A week later, I took the job. So it was one of those where, for me, I think the recruiting aspect, so it was hard because it was scrutinized, and like there was a lot of visibility from execs that probably didn't exist in other parts of the year or the business. But also, like, for candidates, some people saw Meta as like evil. Like, I don't want to be a part of it. Don't reach out to me. Please put me on a no call list. Like, that was new for me. Because a lot of people view on the other side Meta as like the mecca of like, I made it. And this is the best place possibly for me. So you had a very like split point of view on Meta externally. But for me, scrutinized means you have a chance to like be visible. Like, the lights are on at all times. So like your practice is also your game in a way. And there is a rare chance to build influence and change at a company that doesn't always allow you to do that. Right. So
Mhm.
the scrutiny came with a lot of pressure, but to me, like one of the most fulfilling experiences of my career. And I had a fantastic team and partners there. But I had one goal. So what comes with scrutiny? Don't be in the news. So pleased to say during my time there, myself, my team did not make it into the news. So we did accomplish that goal. And I don't think they have since, which is awesome to see there as well.
Um, what did you learn from your time there overall? Because Meta is, as you said, is so different. So many different POVs on it. Like, what did you learn as a leader in HR there?
Yeah, I think I'll give you three. One is I learned that I could do it, right? One of the reasons I went to Meta is like you go to agency, you're one of the best. You're like, all right, cool. But you're like anyone could do that if they work hard enough. Then you got to come. So like once you get to like a level like Meta, a lot of people have imposter syndrome. I don't think I suffered from that, but like I wasn't sure how I'd equate to people that are as good and better than me because I'd been used to being one of the high performers in every room. This was new, right? So it taught me I belonged there. And then it gave me confidence that like not only do you belong there, but you can do some really cool things at a really big place. Like go chase that, right? So it like met me at my ambition and supported me throughout all that. So I think for me it was a perfect fit at the right time. I think there was a lot of perceptions on like it's a bad place to work and they don't treat employees well. I couldn't disagree more. I thought it was a collection of brilliant minds who treated their employees incredibly well, both from an incentive standpoint, but also respect. I had one of the best bosses you could ever have. And it wasn't just him, it was my peers, it was our extended peers. So the people make the environment. And I mentioned the drive, the intelligence, the no ego, like that manifested across the org. And I would say the last thing is like the reality of not being able to influence at a company that large. Like that was always my selling point at Chewy. Don't go to Meta, you can't make a difference. I learned how wrong I was, right? So it's like a point of reflection for me where I'm like, damn, I was probably selling people the wrong thing. And there's some instances where I highly doubt you can make a lot of change. Um, but you certainly can if you are positioned in the right place. And I thought that was just really awesome because I think I had a unique experience that not everyone does.
I think that's super cool that to say that you can inflict change in a huge tech organization if you're in the right seat. And you have to be the right person in the right seat. So I think that's really inspirational for a lot of folks that are coming up in this space and thinking about like where can they go and make an impact? Does it have to always be at a smaller company? And the answer is no. And I think you're living proof of that. So okay, so after Meta, you went to Klaviyo. For people that aren't as familiar with the company, what is it and what drew you to it?
So what is it? It's the first B2C CRM, sort of big launch there. A couple months, maybe a year ago now, lose track of time, but we're the first ever B2C CRM. But to simplify it for folks to just understand, if you use Shopify to help you run an online store, think of Klaivyo as what helps you grow that store, right? So we take customer data, turn that into personalized marketing, services, support that drives revenue for your site. So e-commerce is our primary cohort, but it extends beyond that and will continue to do so as we scale. So think Shopify runs your store, Klaviyo helps empower it to grow. And it ranges from entrepreneurs, companies of one to enterprise as well. So goes throughout that spectrum as we go upstream. What drew me to it? Okay. Fourth IPO, so the S1. So I was familiar with Klaviyo because I had launched Chewy in Boston. So became familiar with the talent, the personnel, and I happened to have met the prior chief people officer who helped bring me here originally. But it was the sell. Like I never thought it would go public. So it was that messy middle of like, hey, we're finally here, but we need a lot of help and we need a lot of work. And we need to transform the way we think. We need to transform the way TA operates and shows up. And there was a lot of that going there. So I knew what I signed up for. It wasn't going to be easy. It wasn't a money play. It wasn't a money grab. It was like, hey, this is a long term. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. I need you to kind of rebuild the foundations to allow us to get to this next phase. And I think that's where I am most fulfilled, but also I think that's where I operate best. So it seemed like a natural fit. It's in Boston. So for whatever reason, Boston seems to keep pulling me back. But I consider Boston a second home at this point. So that was an added bonus as well.
How do you think TA shows up in organizations, like big or small? Like, how do you guys work with executives? I think it'd be helpful for people to understand from your point of view.
Yeah, I think a lot of that depends on how TA is viewed by those folks. But I think if you're talking about, where I think the most successful TA teams operate, it's as a partner, it's as someone who is very aligned to business objectives, business outcomes, very aligned to timelines, impacts, things of that nature. So I think a lot of times companies make the mistake of just viewing TA as like, you're my hiring agent. If I have roles, I'll call on you. If I don't, like wait around your own call for when I do, right? And there's oftentimes, in my opinion, a bad decision to not engage in like what the business teams are doing, why it's important. That leads you to be a storyteller, to attract the right talent, to get the people who want to be a part of the organization and align to those goals and interests, right? And I think now with AI, that's actually more important than ever because the way of working is changing, the way people do their jobs, their job descriptions, like all that's evolving. So to me, it's like it's got to be partnership first. It's got to be built on a good story, built on good sharing, or I would say consistent information sharing and respect, honestly, of all parties to understand their role in things. TA is very difficult. I think sometimes it's perceived as just hire this person and have them show up in this date. There's so much more that goes into that and so much cross-functional dependencies that are needed. So establishing those partnerships at that, I think is so critical to seeing success and winning together, which is a value of ours, but it is something I think is just so important and paramount. I think if you're just trying to do it on your own, it's never going to be as successful or as fun as doing it together.
Do you guys see a lot of secrets within the company that people don't think that you see?
Define secrets in this context.
Like anything that shouldn't be widely talked about, whether internally or externally?
Kind of. I don't think so. To clarify, from like an internal trading privileged information standpoint,
Yeah, of course. No.
I would say no, right? I would
I
say,
mean more like where the company is going.
yeah, Yeah. Short answer is yeah. Like we're forefront of a lot of information to help ensure that we're aligned to be able to like operationalize it, right? So
Mhm.
think of like a new country launch or something like that. Like we're launching engineering in Dublin, for example. Really understanding that long range plan to be able to define how we can hit ARR targets or how we can expand outside of Dublin into the EU and what does our policy need to look like. Like you need to be way ahead of that information to be able to understand before we commit to it that it's possible, right? So I think it manifests in that way. I think in a less formal way, people confide in TA. Like you're their first experience, right? So like you're the first point of contact. You bring them into the company, you build that trust. It doesn't end there, right? So sometimes you just hear things like, isn't what we're there for? Like we're not there to intake like someone's feelings on their manager, right? That's your HR business partner. We're not there to understand how people feel about the direction and strategy of the company. That's our leadership teams. But you hear a lot of like the water cooler talk because people want to confide in you. So I think you get a lot of like of the sentiment aspect. And then from a planning standpoint, as we forecast to like our targets, you obviously have to know in advance and be more involved in the long range plan. So I think it's less about like, hey, here's what we need you to do. If
Mhm.
that was the case, I think we'd fail more times than not. It's more about, hey, here's what we're thinking. Here's what it would, and then they look at me to say, what does that mean for you? Can you do it? When can you get that done? And then I
Mhm.
think able to put the pieces together. But TA is such a like nucleus of all different types of feedback that it's very interesting what our team hears. And sometimes they carry a large burden when people feel pressured and all the things to get like their pressure to hire quick because their projects, very scrutinized. Like we also have downsides of that because we'll feel a lot of the pressure of others and their burdens, which sometimes with good intent can become very challenging for the team as well.
NTA generally just has so much responsibility for building the talent for the company. I mean, like you said, you guys are the storytellers. You're almost like the sales engine for the company to get the best talent and attract the best talent and retain the best talent. So it's just such a vital function within any organization. And I mean, you're building out your TA leadership team pretty quickly. What are personal things that you look for when you hire for people on your team that report into you?
At Klaivyo, like we're still small, we're still scrappy.
Mhm.
That's the DNA that like our founder instilled day one. It's still manifest today, right? So like finding people that understand what it's like to work for a founder, the demands, the pivots, the changes. I think it's just having an open mindedness that what they're signing up for today may look a hell of a lot different tomorrow, 6 months from now, a year from now. So I think now more than ever, again, with AI, like how that will transform the job. It's not someone who's scared of it. It's someone that embraces it and sees it as a powerful thing for them, not something that could eliminate something for them. Right. So it's having that open mindedness and like kind of agile mindset that you might be on tech today, product tomorrow, as an example. Right. And that's okay. The fungibility aspect is super important. I don't want an expert in one thing. I want people who are open minded to learn new things. So that's one. The driven no ego to me, I've said it a couple of times, non-negotiable.
Yep.
I don't always find the best team member to be the most successful when it comes to number of hires. There's a lot of things that go into that, but it's how are we lifting up the team, making the team better? How do we look at improvements at scale, not in a silo? So we want people to have that mindset of like, look, I might be really great at something, but how can I make my peers great? They're not intimidated by that. They see that as an opportunity. And then I mentioned builders. I think it's just the DNA of the company as well. But like, how do we build and how do we scale? Right. And I think some people have one or other. They're like, oh, I'm a builder. I want to do it. Then they get in, they're like, holy shit, like this is chaotic or this is not what I signed up for. And you have people that have seen scale so they can build on something already there, but they're not necessarily good at building foundations. So it's just understanding like the point in time for which role we're hiring and what the influence of that role has to figure out where someone needs to fall on that spectrum. Because you always talk about the now hire, then the next hire. You ideally want both, but you got to
Mm.
make sure that you understand the trade-offs of getting one more than the other, and then how you upskill and invest in that person over time. So a lot goes into it. I think nothing is more important and harder than hiring someone in TA. It's my least favorite job to hire for. But I feel very strongly about the team we've hired and the folks we've hired. And that's because it's hard. And I wouldn't change that.
I love it. And also, Klaviyo was named a top great place to work. What do you do to get a title like that?
Yeah. Be known in the right places. But I think if you're talking about how do you establish the right culture that then leads to those places,
Mhm.
it starts with listening, right? So it's like a culture of listening allows you to understand what people care about, what people want, what people feel they have, don't have. So I think a listening culture is part of understanding where to make changes and where not to make changes, where to know you have the right people or you might not have the right people. As I think, especially at companies that go public, private, grow, hyper growth, like there's a lot of things that change over time that could wash people out. So I think listening and understanding like where you are, what's best for you, what's best for your employees is the best way to have a gauge on that real time. And I think it sounds so simple, but just being consistent, right? I think great places to work are where people kind of feel not stable because it's like financially stable. It's stable because they know what to expect. And expectations to me and consistency could mean there's rapid change and change, uh, at all times, but you're consistent in how you set those expectations, what people are signing up for, and what ultimately leads to people staying, right? So at some, you look at environments, they're intense, they're demanding, those are, kind of cost of entries, but then what's the reward? And I think being able to clearly articulate that both from an incentives financial standpoint as well as an opportunity standpoint, I think gets you on a list because it's clear and people come to you to be a part of that. And that's where that shift starts to take place.
Okay, so you just made the Talent 100 list. How do you recommend other talent leaders differentiate themselves in the market? And what traits do you think have contributed to your success? I have an idea based off of what you shared, but would love to hear again.
Yeah. I'll start with traits, I think, get you to see sustainable success and surface in one of these lists. I think it's about being proactive. I think folks that kind of stay in the background are never going to make a list like this, right? It's how do you be proactive? How do you take risks, challenge norms? I think to really be leading and try to experiment, try to advance the space. I think HRTA can be very boring if you don't, but there's a lot of opportunity and innovation to make it better. And I think taking ownership of that is very important. I think lastly, you have to care, right? It sounds so like, I would say hypocritical, but I think a lot of leaders go into leadership to be recognized and incentivized, but they don't actually want to lead people or like really take that responsibility of helping others as serious as I think they should. So I think there's also this genuine care for being a leader and what it means to show up as a leader. That I think is an incredibly important trait that I think is shared by many of the others I'm humbled to be a part of the list with. But I think if you look at how do I look at ways to differentiate for talent, I think it's giving back. I think it's easy to take, right? It's like, what do you give back to the community? How are you trying to advance others outside of your own walls? And how do you share that information and want to build that community? And I think Meta foundationally is built on the concept of community. That's something I have certainly taken to everywhere I've been since, because I think that community aspect is so important. And then just building a strong network. I think there's a balance because some people try too hard to politic and be that person who's visible and seen. And I think there's a balance to not overdo it. But building a strong network of trusted people, having a kind of advisory circle that you can speak with and understand points of views and openly debate, I think helps you become, someone who grows fast and becomes eventually recognized in those types of circles.
Is there something that you did earlier in your career in talent that you wouldn't do again today?
Yes. So agency. So we talked about the good things about agency recruiting. I think the one thing I wish I knew earlier was it's not about me. You're taught an agency to buy into the concept of like, you can make an uncapped amount of money if you work hard enough. What I didn't realize at the time is like, it's pretty lonely when you do that by yourself. And I was the type, my first few years of my career, anyone who worked with me, God bless them, I amended this over time, but all I cared about was making money and working hard. It wasn't about making friends. It wasn't about being liked. I didn't care about any of that. And to me, I just want to be the most successful and make the most money. And I did. The problem was it was pretty damn lonely, right? So I
Mhm.
think what I wish my leaders at the time had helped me do was just to better understand that the there's a way to do it together and still enjoy it, still achieve those things. And as I look back, like I'm glad it taught me that level of grind and like I don't have a regret per se. Um, but I wish others could have enjoyed it more with me in those early days. And I've made a point since then to make it not about how many hires can I make, but how many lives can I change by getting them the right opportunity. So I think if you lead with that, if you do the right things and you care the right way, all the successes come with it, right? If you um, want to help your hiring leaders make the right hires, you in turn benefit because you have the right information. You go to the right candidates, it makes it a better process. You get the hires, right? So I used to look at it as like how to do those, how to get the outcome, but I never thought about how to like look at it the other side. And that's certainly something I would probably advise folks to be mindful of in TA early on is it's not about you, it's about the things you can do for others. And in turn, if you do those enough in the right way, you'll see a high level of success more times than not.
Yeah. I mean, talent acquisition is like fundamentally in the business of changing people's lives. And it's like a butterfly effect because if you change someone's life, you change their their family's life, their friend's life, like it's a ripple effect. So for us it's super important at Twill too because we're in the business of people getting hired. So it's like it changes their partner's life, their spouse's life, their kids' lives. It's just like a so it's a really just like so much responsibility and greatness in this role. Okay, we're going into our last and final segment. And so we call this HR off the record. And it's just quick answers. And if you blank on something, you can, say pass. But what's the worst job you've ever had?
I won't name the company, but one of my first jobs out of college was cold calling with an unknown number, random small businesses to have them place ads in like sports programs. So think about if you're at a college football game, they give you the program. It's like the
Mhm.
advertisements in there, but it to me was like borderline a scam, and it was during a recession. And like I still to this day, like it wasn't bad, but I still to this day like it was the worst job I've ever had, no question.
Tell us your biggest HR ick.
All right, trigger moment. LinkedIn influencers. I hate it. Like hate it with a passion, especially if it's driven by AI, but I hate it in general. Especially in TA. Like I just think the best ones are usually quiet or have like a few things to say. They're not politicking to get likes or people to sign up to get 15 minutes of their advice. I've never like gravitated to that, and it's a big ick for me.
I didn't realize there were influencers that did that, like sign up for 15 minutes of like advice. Is it
Oh
do they
yeah.
charge
It'll
for it?
be like promoted ads. It'll be like
Oh,
recruiters who are like, hey, like people are laying off, the market's bad. Spend book 30 minutes with me so I can give you advice on your career, which I hope is well intended. But knowing what I saw during those time periods and the influencers that I saw,
no.
it wasn't the highest caliber folks that are providing those things. And I think it was more of a like be seen, be visible, not be great type of moment. And like, I'm not a fan.
Yeah, hard pass for you. Okay, one interview question you'd banish forever if you could.
Controversial. I don't like a tell me about yourself. I think it derails conversations. I think it leads to lack of
Totally agree.
structure. It's
Mhm.
just too open-ended and too distracting, especially if an interview's short.
If you weren't in talent acquisition, what would you be doing besides making scam calls?
Yeah. Not making spam calls. Wasn't good at it. I wanted to be a sports agent. I considered law school for that reason. Sports fan. I just think it would be a fascinating career. So I think that would be the pursuit, if not for TA.
What's a red flag for you in a resume?
Nowadays, bolded words.
Oh, really? That's I think largely driven by AI,
I think
actually.
I think so too. I've always felt it was just like someone curated it for someone else. Like I think it's
Mhm.
less authentic, but I think with AI now for sure, it's like lazy to me. So bold words to me just show like a lack of, I would say, personalization to the job or lack of like investment in actually representing yourself, which I think is the point of a resume.
Yeah, and ironic because I think most people that are bolding words or are using ChatGPT to bold words think they're customizing it to a job.
I agree.
Like, that's what they think they're doing. Okay, what's a green flag that most people overlook?
Yeah, this one's tough. I would say longevity with one company, but
Mhm.
showing growth. So I think there's this eventually when you're at a company long enough, I think there's this stigma that like you only know one way of working or you're not going to be open to change or be adaptable. I think it's so underrated. I think it also shows loyalty. If you're showing mobility within one company, it shows drive. But I think somewhere, somehow along the way, people get penalized for tenure and growth in an organization, which our parents and grandparents would kick us for because that was just the way they were brought up.
Right.
So I still think it's a great thing. I think you have to ask the right questions, but I think often overlooked and sometimes you miss on good talent because of it.
I think if you can stay at one company and get promoted over and over again, it just shows so much strength in whatever you're doing. Best career advice you've ever received?
During my agency grind, so that's actually perfect segue from my prior comment. Don't expect everyone to work as hard or care as much as you do. I think as I started getting leadership roles, I would get pissed that my team didn't want it as much as I did when I was in their seat. And my boss at the time set me down because he's like, look, your drive is what's going to kill you in this job, or you're never going to be a good leader. Because I wanted to be the best in the office, the market, the state,
Mhm.
region, the country. I didn't care. I was like, if someone's better than me, I'm not good enough yet. Holding others, everyone, to that standard is not realistic. So the advice was just like, you got to understand what matters to folks. You got to be able to understand like what drives them and all the things. So like that was great advice for me. And I think on that same note, it was like invest more time in your best employee, not your worst.
Mhm.
And I think that was something that resonated a lot because I think it's easy to be like, I need to make improvements with these folks. And like your best people, they just kind of earlier in my career, they're just like, you're good, go do it. I wish I got more development and I wasn't perfect by any means. So I needed it. But you kind of ignore people producing at the highest level. I think that's where the investment should be most spent.
I think that's such great advice to invest more time in top performers, but also to learn what motivates employees and use that to drive whatever you need to drive within the company. It's like so underrated. What's the worst career advice you've ever received?
So I got this my whole career until Meta. So kudos for Meta for breaking this bad habit. But invest in person's weaknesses more than their strengths. So like that advice always led to trying to change people or make them good or like something they don't like
Mhm.
versus like doubling down on what they're really good at and getting the max value. Um, I remember when I got to Meta, I was like, this is a weird concept. Like they really want you to focus on what someone's really good at and like really make sure that they're great at it, but you're not trying to fix someone, right? And it took me a minute to calibrate because I was programmed for so long to think that way. What I realized is like people don't want to be great at everything. They don't have to be. You don't have to fix someone to be great at everything. Like double down on what they're really great at and let them be great. And I felt looking back, I probably held people back trying to force things that they didn't want or they were never going to be good at instead of unlocking what they were great at. And I try very hard not to do that now, but definitely bad advice for sure.
Really, really interesting. What is one tool that every TA team needs?
My answer is gonna be Bright Hire here. Great company, great founding team. Obviously, an acquisition now. Not taking notes and be able to focus on an interview and be able to really like have that connection without that distraction for both parties, I think is incredibly impactful from an experience standpoint, but also just like being able to maximize the time spent. So Bright Hire has many more qualities than just transcription, but I think just having that capability allows you to have more meaningful conversations.
The question that everyone wants to know, our final two questions. Do you reply to cold LinkedIn DMs?
Sometimes I get a lot, so not all. I do read them all. I will say I do not reply to them all. Sometimes it depends on what the context is and who's
Mhm.
asking. But I try my best to where I can.
And final piece of advice, obviously there is a job market. There's tons of people looking for work. There's people looking to go into different careers. What can people do now to stand out?
Basic answer, be authentic. I mentioned my ick is HR influencing or LinkedIn influencing. I
Hmm.
think the authenticity piece is critical because AI is going to make everyone in some ways sound the same, apply the same, resume looks the same, and obviously have different things there. But to me, it's like who you are is still a differentiator. You still have to interact as people. You still have to make decisions. So to me, it's just being authentic, being true to yourself. I think will become what makes everyone different over time. And I fear that in some ways that's becoming lost. And I really hope it's something that isn't, because I think it's so incredibly important.
And final question, because I just thought of it. If someone applies to a job at Klaviyo, at Meta, at Chewy, or another organization, they're going through like the careers website, they've applied. Do you think there is something beneficial to that candidate doing something else proactive, like reaching out to the recruiter or the hiring manager on LinkedIn or sending an email? Or is it better to just apply and like pray that you're seen?
I think there's always a better approach than just applied, but I would say both require being thoughtful. So said another way, like if you apply to the job, make sure you fit the description
Hmm.
in many ways. If you don't, and it's more aspirational or something, like use that connection or use that what you just described to get in front of folks. I think for me, it's like most companies offer a referral bonus. So people are inclined to refer people to jobs, right? And that helps them get visibility because it's tagged as like a referral from someone in the company who knows the company. So there's a level of credibility there that's just from the jump, not cold.
Hmm.
Um, but I think it's looking at LinkedIn first of who you know at that company. Okay, cool. Start there, right? So I think the outreach can be warm to cold. I would say just look at being thoughtful to have it be as warm as possible. I think that's where you're going to set the highest degree of success. If it has to be completely cold, I think acknowledging that, right? And having a compelling, quick hook, similar to how a recruiter would reach out to a candidate of why someone should consider it. I think is very important. But I always say like it's much easier to get in when you know someone. So try to leverage that as best you can. And if you don't, try to figure out how to get in front of someone. I think coffee chats, like meetings like that, don't happen as much as they used to. I still think there's a lot of value in that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on Call HR. We got so many tips for people in leadership and how to sort of like motivate their teams, invest in their teams, how to navigate the job market as a candidate. Don't bold keywords on your resume is like the major headline here because ChatGPT actually does that for you. So like go in and unbold it. But thank you, Phil, so much for being here.
Of course. Thank you for having me.